Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being well informed. Today, we are plunging headfirst into a topic that sits right at the heart of modern finance, really. It's all about how organizations handle the fundamental flow of money. Specifically, we're looking at a powerful financial transaction engine called Ledger Rocket, and maybe even more crucially, we're exploring the step by step journey an organization can take to actually implement this kind of system within its, complex existing structure. We've got a stack of source material for this dive, documents that lay out Ledger Rocket's core function, what it is, what it does, and just as importantly, a series of really detailed implementation scenarios. Think of these scenarios as a kind of roadmap, our mission today, to unpack these sources, understand exactly what Ledger Rocket promises, and walk through that journey. What are the actual steps involved? What specific benefits can they expect at each stage? And what are the real tangible implications for how businesses manage, understand, and, well, control their money flows?
And this really is a critical area for a deep dive,
Yeah.
because understanding how a core system like this fits into a company's existing landscape. Well, it isn't just a technical exercise. Not at all. It profoundly impacts operational processes, how finance teams actually function, overall financial control, regulatory compliance, and ultimately, how a business sees and understands its own financial reality in real time, which is key.
Absolutely. And the sources lay out a pretty fascinating, a logical path, really, moving from addressing, say, a targeted pain point in one specific area, all the way to Ledger Rocket potentially becoming the single source of financial truth across the entire enterprise.
Okay, let's unpack this transformation journey. Let's start right at the beginning with the absolute basics. What exactly is Ledger Rocket at its core? What does the source material tell us it is? Okay, so peeling back that first layer from the Ledger Rocket overview source, the fundamental definition is presented very clearly. It's described as a real-time financial transaction engine and single source of truth. That phrase alone gives you a powerful sense of its positioning. It's designed to be right there, embedded, in the flow of financial activity.
Real-time financial transaction engine. Okay, we hear terms like real-time thrown around a lot. How is this different from, say, a traditional core banking system that processes transactions or maybe a standard general ledger system? What makes Ledger Rocket's approach distinct based on these sources?
Yeah, that's a critical distinction, and one the source really emphasizes. Traditional systems often operate in a more deferred manner. A
Yeah.
transaction request comes in, it might get queued up, processed in batches maybe, or recorded after a whole series of events have already completed in the operational systems. The ledger update, that might happen later.
Delayed.
Exactly. Yeah. Ledger Rocket, however, is designed to sit directly in the real-time request path. Operational systems, and that could be anything, a payment initiation system, a loan disbursement module, a trading platform, whatever initiating a financial value movement. They send transaction requests to Ledger Rocket, and it processes them synchronously.
Synchronously. Okay, what does that mean in practice?
So this synchronous processing is absolutely key. It means the system initiating the transaction gets an immediate definitive response back from Ledger Rocket. It's either approved and recorded or it's rejected. It doesn't proceed. The initiating system doesn't move forward until Ledger Rocket confirms. So this isn't about logging something after the fact. It's about executing and recording it as it happens, right in the moment.
Instantly validated, instantly executed. So when one of these operational systems sends a request, what does that real-time validation process actually involve, according to the source material anyway?
Right. The source details this under real-time validation and execution. When a request hits Ledger Rocket, it's immediately checked against two main things. First, it validates against the current state of the ledger itself. So like if it's a debit transaction, it checks if the account has sufficient balance right now, instantly.
Makes sense.
Second, it validates against a set of configurable validation rules. And these rules are dynamic. They're central to how it functions. If the request meets all the criteria balance check, rule checks, it proceeds immediately to execution. If not, it's stopped cold. Right there.
Okay, and these configurable validation rules you mentioned, the source talks about two types. Can we unpack those a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. The source outlines two distinct but sort of complementary types of validation rules. First up, you have product-specific rules. These are often referred to as templates. Now, these templates are typically defined outside of Ledger Rocket, maybe by the teams who build and manage specific financial products. Think like a checking account, a credit card, a loan, or maybe a specific type of investment. These rules define how a transaction request specific to that product should translate into formal double-entry accounting entries. So, for instance, a payment template might specify which accounts get debited and credited for a successful transaction, considering things like fees, interest, the specifics. It basically ensures the accounting logic is perfectly aligned with how the product is designed to work.
Okay, so the people building the products define how those products actually hit the ledger. That sounds pretty flexible.
It is. It's designed for flexibility at that product level. And this is where the second type comes in. And it's crucial you have cross-cutting rules. These are defined centrally by core functions like finance, compliance, treasury, maybe risk. These are the overarching, non-negotiable policies that must be enforced across all transactions, regardless of which specific product initiated them.
Ah, okay. So like global rules.
Exactly. Think of these as the enterprise-wide financial integrity controls. A cross-cutting rule might be something like no debit transaction can ever overdraw an account below a certain floor, or all transactions above X amount must be tagged for compliance review, or maybe no funds can move to a sanctioned entity. The critical point highlighted in the source is that the product-specific logic, those templates, they cannot bypass these cross-cutting rules. This provides a really powerful layer of centralized financial policy enforcement and control that operates uniformly across every single product and transaction flowing through LedgerRocket.
That distinction feels really important. You need that flexibility for product innovation, sure, but you also need absolute consistent control from the central finance and risk functions. The source also mentions something about a flexible no-opinion data model for accounts, entities, and events. How does that fit into this rule structure?
Yeah, that flexibility is kind of what enables those really granular rules. LedgerRocket doesn't impose a rigid structure on what an account is, or what an entity like a customer or counterparty is, or even the specific attributes of an event. It provides a core framework, definitely, but organizations can extend the data model. They can add their own attributes to these elements, accounts, entities, events. And this allows them to define very, very precise validation rules based on their specific business data. Maybe rules that depend on customer risk scores or geographic location, specific contract terms, you name it. This tailoring is pretty crucial for complex financial institutions.
Okay, so let's trace the path. A transaction request arrives. It gets validated instantly against current balances and these flexible, multi-layered rules, both product and central. What happens next if everything checks out, if it's valid?
Right. This is where LedgerRocket exercises its authority, as the source describes under authority and record creation. It has definitive power over the transaction flow. Firstly, it has rejection authority. If a request violates any rule, doesn't matter if it's a product-specific template requirement or a critical cross-cutting policy, LedgerRocket has the authority to immediately reject or maybe tag that transaction. And this is a critical preventative control. It means erroneous, non-compliant, or potentially fraudulent transactions are stopped before they ever make a permanent mark on the financial record.
Preventing bad data from even getting into the system in the first place? That sounds like, well, a massive shift compared to detecting and cleaning it up later.
Oh, absolutely. It shifts the whole paradigm from a reactive find and fix model, which is painful, to a proactive prevent at source model. And the second type of authority is approval authority and ledger entry. If a transaction request is valid, LedgerRocket immediately approves and records it. The source really stresses it immediately. This happens synchronously with the request. And it creates two things simultaneously: immutable double-entry accounting records,
Yep.
The debits and credits, and also a detailed record of the event itself in an event store.
Wow, okay. So one single step does two really vital things at the same time. It confirms it operationally and creates the permanent financial record.
Precisely. For the operational system that sends a request, that synchronous approved response is the confirmation. It tells them the transaction has been executed and is now definitively recorded in the official financial ledger. And then for finance, audit, compliance, that immediate record in the append-only ledger is the definitive, immutable financial accounting record. And this is key. Account balances are updated instantaneously as these entries are made.
That instantaneous balance update across the entire system. That sounds like it unlocks some significant capabilities. What are the implications?
It does, and the source definitely highlights this as a major consequence. Because LedgerRocket is updating balances in real time as transactions are approved and recorded, accurate, real-time balances become available, well, across the entire organization. Think about what that means. Operational systems get synchronous confirmation based on the final ledger state. Treasury can see the company's cash and liquidity position right now, not yesterday's or last batches, now. Risk management can monitor exposures in real time. Finance teams have accurate, auditable data available immediately for reporting, for reconciliation, or as we'll see, maybe it's eventual elimination. And for audits, it changes the speed of insight.
And the underlying tech for this immutable record, the source mentions it's built on something called Tiger Beetle.
Yes, that's right. The core financial entries, the debits, credits, and the resulting balances, they're stored permanently in an append-only ledger. The source specifies this foundation is built on Tiger Beetle, which is a financial database designed specifically for this kind of high-volume, high-integrity, immutable record keeping. It basically ensures that once a transaction is recorded, it cannot be altered or deleted. It creates a permanent, cryptographically verifiable history of all financial movement. Super robust.
Okay, so this authoritative immutable record gets created in real time. Where does this foundational data go next? How does it fit into the, broader enterprise data landscape, data lakes, and all that?
Right. The source indicates this authoritative data is then typically fed downstream into a data lake or a similar kind of data platform. Now, this isn't replacing LedgerRocket as the source of truth for those transactions, but it allows that definitive financial truth to be used for broader analytics, maybe large-scale regulatory reporting that might require aggregation or joining with other data sets and, feeding other downstream systems that consume data for various purposes. So LedgerRocket becomes the trusted high-integrity source feeding that wider data ecosystem.
Okay, so putting all of this together, what's LedgerRocket's specific role in the overall banking or financial architecture? Is it trying to replace the entire core banking system?
No, and the source is really explicit about this distinction. It's crucial to understanding its value proposition. LedgerRocket positions itself as a single authoritative ledger for all the transactions it processes. Its primary role, and a major benefit it brings, is ensuring that operational stakeholders, the systems initiating transactions, and finance audit stakeholders share the exact same, consistent view of the financial reality
Right.
at any given moment.
Ah, the reconciliation killer.
That's the goal. Yeah. This is what directly addresses and can eventually eliminate that massive, costly pain point of reconciliation problems that always arise when different systems hold separate, slightly divergent records of the same thing. But importantly, the source states it does not aim to replace the entire core banking system or, the bank's capabilities built around customer interaction and product definition.
Hmm.
It doesn't manage product definitions, though it uses those templates defined externally. It doesn't handle customer onboarding, KYC, servicing interfaces, or the complexities of managing the customer lifecycle itself.
And the thesis presented in the source is that banks should actually own those customer-facing and product-defining layers themselves. That's where they differentiate.
Exactly. That's the core idea. LedgerRocket provides the essential, high-integrity, ultra-reliable foundation for financial record-keeping and transaction execution. Rock solid. This then allows banks to focus their innovation and differentiation efforts on the layers above LedgerRocket: the customer experience, the specific features and pricing of their financial products, how they onboard and serve clients. That's their competitive space.
So the way banks integrate is by having their operational systems, their customer-facing systems, send those synchronous transaction requests directly to LedgerRocket for the validation and execution step.
Precisely. And this integration pattern directly supports a more modern modular architecture. Sometimes people call it coreless banking, or maybe a componentized core. It allows organizations to break down those old monolithic legacy platforms. Instead of one single giant system trying to do everything from customer interface to product definition to transaction processing and ledger keeping, you can separate these functions. LedgerRocket handles the high-integrity ledger and the synchronous transaction execution part. And other, maybe more flexible or specialized systems handle the customer interaction or the product logic. This enables much more agility and modernization elsewhere in the architecture.
Okay, right. So summing up that first source on LedgerRocket's core, it's a real-time synchronous engine, sits in the transaction flow, validates requests against flexible rules, both product rules and central ones. It has the authority to approve or reject, stopping bad stuff, instantly creates immutable, auditable, double-entry records and events, updates, balances immediately, and serves as the single authoritative ledger, solving reconciliation problems by ensuring everyone's looking at the same real-time numbers. But it doesn't replace everything. It provides that foundational financial truth layer. Okay, so that's the what. But bringing a system with this kind of fundamental capability into a large, complex organization, that's got to be a journey, right? How do you actually get from here to there?
Yeah, that's exactly where the second set of sources, the ones detailing the implementation scenarios, becomes incredibly valuable. They don't just talk about the end state, they lay out a whole transformation journey overview.
Hmm.
And this highlights that adopting LedgerRocket isn't typically a big bang, all-at-once replacement. It's much more likely to be a logical, phased progression through distinct scenarios, each one representing a deeper integration and a more fundamental transformation of the financial architecture.
A journey, not just flipping a switch. Why is that evolutionary path the sort of standard approach described?
Well, the sources really imply it's the most practical and, frankly, risk-aware way to approach such a foundational change, especially for large institutions. Trying to switch everything over simultaneously, it's just incredibly complex and carries enormous risk. The phased approach allows organizations to manage that complexity, to mitigate the risks involved, learn as they go, and importantly, derive measurable value at each stage of the journey, which helps build the business case for further transformation down the line.
Right, build momentum. And what are the key factors that influence where an organization might start this journey and, how fast they can realistically move through these different stages? The sources list several transformation considerations.
Yes, these considerations are absolutely crucial determinants of an organization's specific path. The first one is pretty obvious: organizational size and complexity. I mean, a massive global bank with dozens, maybe hundreds of disparate systems and complex legal entity structures. They face a very different challenge than, say, a smaller, newer institution. Larger orgs simply have more systems to integrate with, more diverse business lines to coordinate, more stakeholders to manage. This typically necessitates a more gradual approach, maybe starting small and scaling deliberately.
Makes total sense. You can't easily untangle decades of complex systems overnight in some huge bank.
Exactly right. Then there's technical debt. The state of an organization's existing technology landscape is, well, it's perhaps the single biggest determinant of speed and approach. If core legacy systems are monolithic, maybe poorly documented, difficult to integrate with, or require specialized, hard-to-find skills to maintain, then transitioning to a model where product systems write directly to LedgerRocket like you see in the later scenarios, that becomes much harder and slower. High technical debt can significantly constrain the options and really prolong the journey.
Okay. And the regulatory environment, how does that factor into the equation?
This one can kind of cut both ways, actually.
Yeah.
On one hand, the compliance benefits LedgerRocket offers things like immutable audit trails, embedded controls, consolidated data for reporting. These can be a major driver for adoption. It might actually accelerate implementation in specific, highly regulated domains like payments or derivatives trading. Organizations facing new regulations or compliance headaches might prioritize LedgerRocket specifically to address those. On the other hand, dealing with multiple complex regulatory jurisdictions globally, that adds significant complexity to the implementation itself. You have to worry about data residency, different reporting requirements, local specificities, all of which can slow down a broader enterprise-wide rollout.
And business priorities must also heavily influence the path they choose.
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
What are the organization's most pressing pain points or its strategic goals right now? If they are, say, losing huge amounts of time and money on manual reconciliation, there's a really strong incentive to move quickly towards the scenarios that promise to eliminate that. If the priority is faster product innovation, well, then enabling those stateless product systems you see in the later scenarios becomes much more attractive. Strategic shifts, too, like a merger or an acquisition or maybe launching a completely new digital business line, these can create windows of opportunity or even necessity for implementing a system like LedgerRocket. Sometimes that allows for a faster jump to later scenarios, at least for the new parts of the business.
And finally, risk appetite. Just how cautious or aggressive is the organization generally?
Yes, this definitely plays a significant role in the chosen starting point and the overall pace. Organizations with a low risk appetite, maybe more conservative ones, they'll probably prefer to begin with the least disruptive scenarios like Scenario 1. They'll want to build confidence, validate the technology, learn from a contained implementation before committing to more fundamental architectural changes.
Makes sense. Start small.
Whereas organizations more comfortable with transformation, perhaps digital native companies or those facing really urgent market pressure, they might be willing to take on the higher initial complexity and risk of jumping further along the journey, potentially even aiming directly for Scenario 4 if their existing architecture even allows for it. So you see, while the scenarios present this logical regression 1 through 4, these factors, the organizational scale and complexity, the burden of technical debt, the demands of the regulatory landscape, strategic business priorities, and the company's inherent risk appetite, They really determine the unique starting point, the sequencing, and the speed of transformation for any specific organization.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. Let's dive into each of these scenarios now. Let's see what this transformation journey actually looks like step by step, starting with scenario one, targeted domain consolidation. All right, scenario one, targeted domain consolidation. Looking at the diagram and the description provided in the source, it seems like LedgerRocket is brought in, but only for a specific slice of the business. The diagram shows product systems A through F existing, but only A, B, and C are actually feeding into LedgerRocket.
That's exactly the essence of scenario one. LedgerRocket is deployed, but its scope is intentionally limited. It's positioned downstream of a subset of the organization's product systems, like you said, in the diagram, systems A, B, and C. It acts as a consolidation layer, specifically for the data originating just from these selected systems. The diagram labels LedgerRocket in this role as a consolidation system. And crucially, it shows other product systems, D, E, H, F, operating completely outside of this initial scope. Other departments might still be accessing data directly from them the old way.
And the key characteristic here, it seems, is that the original product systems, A, B, C, are still considered the ultimate source of truth, right? They're labeled golden source in this diagram.
Exactly. That's spot on. In scenario one, the original product systems maintain their own transaction stores, their own ledgers, and they are considered the authoritative source, the golden source. LedgerRocket receives data from them, either through maybe a real-time feed, meaning transactions get sent over immediately after they happen in the source system, or perhaps via direct access for specific queries against that consolidated data, as the diagram suggests. It functions effectively as a consolidated subledger, but only for the transactions originating from systems A, B, and C.
So it's a very limited scope implementation then, aimed at solving maybe a specific problem or improving reporting for just one part of the business, one department maybe.
Precisely. The scope is intentionally limited. The focus is on consolidating data from potentially disparate systems within a specific department or a business line, or maybe a functional area like Treasury. The major advantage and the implementation benefit highlighted for this scenario is minimal disruption. Minimal disruption to the broader organization and the existing system architecture. You're not changing how most systems work, you're just adding a consolidation layer on top for a very specific purpose.
Okay. What are the specific benefits an organization can realistically expect to gain from taking this initial step? What's the payoff for scenario one?
Well, the implementation benefits listed are pretty compelling for a first stage. It offers lower implementation risk, obviously, because the changes are confined. You're just integrating a few systems and impacting a limited user group. This usually leads to a faster time to first value because the project itself is smaller and more focused. It's also a great opportunity to build expertise with LedgerRocket and its concepts, but on a manageable scale.
Learn by doing, basically.
Exactly. There's typically a clear business case targeting a specific pain point within that domain, like maybe consolidating data for better reporting or analytics in that area. And this helps validate technical integration approaches before you even think about attempting a wider rollout. It's kind of like a contained experiment, really.
And how does LedgerRocket's core capability actually translate into tangible business outcomes in this limited scenario one based on the sources? What does the matrix show?
Okay, looking at the matrix and the benefits list for scenario one, you definitely get core LedgerRocket capabilities, but their impact is inherently limited by the scope, right? You achieve consolidated real-time data, which is great, but importantly, only within that specific department's domain covered by systems A, B, and C. You start to leverage template enforcement that gets a single check in the matrix, meaning the pre-approved event templates are used to process transactions from these systems consistently as they're ingested. And this enables improved liquidity monitoring and simplified analytics, but only for that targeted domain, because the data is now finally in one place, structured, and real-time for that area. Other core capabilities of LedgerRocket, according to that matrix, are technically present or available at this stage, also marked with just a single check. Things like ultra-high transaction throughput, real-time balance updates, they're derived from the source systems here, universal store value support, a comprehensive audit trail within its scope, blockchain anchoring, simple REST API integration, and liquidity management tools. So LedgerRocket has these capabilities, but in scenario one, they're only applied to that subset of data coming from systems A, B, and C.
But the matrix clearly shows limitations too, right? Particularly around reconciliation and that big idea of a single source of truth.
Correct. The matrix explicitly marks internal reconciliation requirements with new. This suggests that while consolidation might make reconciliation within the targeted domain a bit easier, or maybe reduce some manual effort, the benefits text mentions limited reconciliation reduction and easier reconciliation within the targeted domain. It doesn't eliminate the fundamental need to reconcile LedgerRocket back to the original golden source systems, ABC. And you certainly still need to reconcile data from the rest of the organization, D, E, F, etc., which is completely outside LedgerRocket's view at this point.
Right.
And fundamentally, LedgerRocket is not the single source of truth. That's also a new for the entire organization in this scenario. It just can't be. System integration complexity is marked with OU, indicating, yes, the integration effort is present, but it's presumably less than what you'd face in later, more complex scenarios involving more systems.
Okay. So scenario one is really about dipping a toe in the water. You gain some valuable consolidation, some real-time visibility, maybe some analytical benefits for a specific area. You validate the tech, build internal expertise, but you don't fundamentally change the core architecture or eliminate the need for reconciliation across the whole enterprise. It's a contained first step.
Exactly. It's a very pragmatic way to start, build confidence, and prove value in a limited, manageable scope.
Okay, let's move on then. Scenario two. Consolidated real-time transaction-level subledger. How does this scenario expand the reach and the benefits compared to just scenario one?
Okay, scenario two. Looking at the diagram and description here, the key difference just jumps right out at you immediately. All product systems, A through F, are now shown feeding LedgerRocket. The description explicitly states that existing product systems remain authoritative, but all transactions are synchronized immediately with LedgerRocket. And LedgerRocket's role label expands. It's now called Enterprise Consolidation.
So wait, the product systems A through F are still considered the golden source, just like they were in scenario one. LedgerRocket isn't taking over that authoritative role yet, even though it's getting all the data.
That's a really crucial point of continuity from scenario one, and yes, that's correct according to the source. The individual product systems, A through F, continue to maintain their own transaction logs, their own internal ledgers, and they are still considered the authoritative source of record, the golden source. However, the significant change, the big step up, is that LedgerRocket is now configured to ingest all transactions in real time from every system across the entire enterprise that generates financial transactions.
Okay. And what's the big benefit of bringing all the data into LedgerRocket in real time, even if it's technically still just a subledger sitting downstream of those golden sources? What does that unlock?
The primary benefit, highlighted, is achieving a truly unified, real-time view of transaction activity and financial position across the entire organization. And importantly, doing this without having to disrupt the existing golden source systems. The diagram shows LedgerRocket now feeding consolidated views for critical enterprise functions. Financial reporting gets an enterprise view, treasury gets a unified liquidity view, compliance gets a comprehensive regulatory view. It essentially creates a consistent, enterprise-wide reporting and visibility layer based on real-time data pulled from every corner of the business. Balances derived by LedgerRocket exist, but they exist in parallel with the official balances still held within the individual product systems in this scenario.
Right. So you get that much-needed enterprise-wide financial visibility, better data for central functions, without having to undertake the potentially massive, risky effort of replacing or fundamentally changing all your existing product systems just yet.
That's precisely the value proposition articulated for scenario two. From an implementation perspective, it's significantly less disruptive than the later scenarios because you're not changing the core functionality or, crucially, the data ownership within the product systems themselves. The implementation benefits listed reflect this.
Yeah.
It's less disruptive than later stages. It provides significant reporting and analytics advantages because you finally have that consolidated enterprise data set. It enables improved regulatory and compliance capabilities because you have a single place to look for transaction monitoring and reporting data. You get a real-time financial position view available across the entire organization. And it maintains business continuity by not requiring deep, risky changes to legacy systems.
Okay. And what about the LedgerRocket specific benefits and the business outcomes at this enterprise-wide consolidation stage? How does the matrix look now?
Looking at the matrix and benefits for scenario two, you see many core LedgerRocket features are now being applied across the entire enterprise, which is a big step. Ultra-high transaction processing, still ease, is available for the entire transaction volume of the organization. Real-time balance updates are generated by LedgerRocket based on the feeds from all systems, providing that unified view. Although the source notes these balances are consistent balances dependent on source systems, which is a key reminder that the product system is still technically the ultimate golden source.
Right. It's a derived balance.
Exactly. You also get universal store value support, meaning LedgerRocket can handle and consolidate transactions involving different types of values across the enterprise currencies, maybe other financial instruments or assets, if configured providing a single normalized view. You get a comprehensive audit trail within LedgerRocket, but now it covers all transactions across the enterprise. You see improved liquidity management mentioned, with enhanced dashboards likely drawing from this newly consolidated data. And AI-enhanced compliance monitoring capabilities are significantly bolstered. I mean, having all transaction data in one place enables much more sophisticated pattern analysis and anomaly detection than trying to stitch it together from multiple sources. The benefits text also adds things like enterprise-wide visibility, naturally, improved financial control by centralizing data for monitoring, enhanced regulatory reporting because you have a single source for mandated data, better liquidity management, improved audit capabilities, due to that central comprehensive audit trail and real-time financial intelligence derived from analyzing the consolidated real-time flow.
But based on the matrix, again, reconciliation and the single source of truth idea, they're still not fully addressed even in this scenario, are they? Still marked with an X.
That's correct. The matrix for scenario 2 still shows OOTH for both internal reconciliation requirements and single source of truth. The benefits text does mention reduced manual reconciliation and streamlined processes, although not eliminated. So while having all the data in one place in LedgerRocket certainly makes reconciliation between different systems easier and provides better tools for investigation, you still fundamentally need to reconcile LedgerRocket's records back to the original golden source product systems to ensure consistency and trust. Because LedgerRocket is still technically a downstream copy in this model, albeit a very fast real-time one.
Still got those multiple sources of truth floating around.
Precisely. And system integration complexity remains marked as OOP. This reflects the significant effort involved in integrating all those source systems across the enterprise to reliably feed LedgerRocket in real time. That's not a trivial task.
Okay, so scenario 2 is really about leveraging LedgerRocket as a powerful enterprise-wide real-time data hub. Great for reporting, analytics, central functions like treasury and compliance. You gain significant visibility and control advantages across the board without fundamentally changing the underlying product systems. But you still live with the reality of multiple golden sources and the associated reconciliation challenges that come with that.
Yes, exactly. It's a major step forward for achieving enterprise-wide intelligence and reporting capabilities.
Right.
It lays crucial groundwork by consolidating all that real-time data.
Right. Now, this next stage, it feels like a bridge, maybe, a transition. Let's move to scenario 3, hybrid golden source model. The diagram provided for this scenario looks quite different again.
It is significantly different, yes, and it represents a really fundamental shift in the underlying approach. The Scenario 3 diagram shows a mix of system types feeding into LedgerRocket. You still have some systems labeled Legacy System ABC, golden source, and they're feeding LedgerRocket via a real-time feed, much like we saw in Scenario 2. But you also now see systems labeled New Product DE stateless, and these are feeding LedgerRocket directly via direct transaction. And look, LedgerRocket's own label changes here to hybrid golden source.
Hybrid. Okay, so in this scenario, LedgerRocket actually starts to become the ultimate source of truth, the golden source, but only for some of the systems, not all of them yet.
Exactly. That's the defining characteristic of Scenario 3. It's explicitly positioned as a transitional state, a phased migration path. Newer product systems, or maybe legacy systems that are easier or strategically more important to change, are modified or perhaps built from scratch to write their financial transactions directly to LedgerRocket. For these specific systems, like the new products D and E in the diagram, LedgerRocket is their golden source. They don't maintain their own separate financial ledgers anymore, at least not for the transactions LedgerRocket handles.
They become stateless for those transactions.
Right. Meanwhile, other systems, perhaps older or more complex legacy platforms, the ones that are harder to change, they continue to operate as golden sources themselves and just feed LedgerRocket in real time, just like they did in Scenario 2. It's a mix.
This seems like a very practical approach for large organizations, ones that just can't change everything all at once. It seems realistic.
It is positioned as highly practical. The implementation benefits listed really emphasize this. It's a practical migration approach, specifically designed for complex organizations dealing with mixed technology landscapes. It allows for risk management via phasing keying. You can tackle the migration system by system, learning from each transition containing the risk. You start achieving early benefits for the simpler or higher priority areas that migrate first, which helps demonstrate success and build momentum.
And that success probably helps justify the next step.
Exactly. It creates the business case for more migration, proving the value of moving more systems onto the Ledger Oracle Golden Source model. It's described as a strategy that balances transformation and pragmatism, allowing real progress without demanding an impossible, immediate Big Bang shift for the entire organization.
So what key LedgerRocket benefits start to become fully realized in this hybrid state? At least for those systems that are now using LedgerRocket as their golden source, what do the matrices show here?
Okay, for the product systems that are writing directly to LedgerRocket, the stateless ones, you really start to see the full power of the golden source model come into play. Looking at the matrix and the benefits list for Scenario 3, you achieve a partial single unified ledger, marked O. It's partial because only a portion of the organization's transactions now definitively reside only in LedgerRocket. Template-driven transaction logic gets a UO for those migrated systems. It's fully leveraged for them because LedgerRocket is executing and recording based on those templates right at the point of transaction origination.
No translation needed later.
Right. Real-time position updates also get useful for the migrated systems. They are now truly definitive and authoritative for the accounts managed by those migrated systems. Embedded compliance controls for migrated systems are fully enforced by LedgerRocket as the transactions happen for these systems, providing that robust preventative control we talked about earlier. You also gain API integration advantages, as the direct transaction flow to LedgerRocket is likely happening via modern APIs, enabling tighter, more reliable integration for those systems. A mixed data protection model is naturally in play. Some data now benefits from LedgerRocket's ultra-durable storage as the primary record, while other data still resides primarily in the legacy systems.
And reconciliation, does that start to disappear?
Partially, yes. The benefits list highlights partial reconciliation elimination. Crucially, for the systems that have migrated to using LedgerRocket as their golden source, reconciliation is eliminated for those specific transactions and accounts. That's a huge win for those areas. You also see benefits like enhanced compliance enforcement because it's happening at source for migrated systems, optimized system architecture for the modernized systems that can now be truly stateless, process standardization starts to take hold, targeted system transformation becomes possible, progressive risk management is enabled by the phasing, and operational efficiency gains are realized, specifically in the areas that have been successfully migrated.
And based on the matrix, Scenario 3 is where reconciliation and single source of truth finally start to appear as achieved benefits, even if only partially. They get a check mark now.
Exactly. Both internal reconciliation requirements and the concept of single source of truth are marked with a single check in the matrix for Scenario 3. This indicates that while, yes, you still have reconciliation needs related to the systems not yet migrated, and LedgerRocket isn't the single source for the entire organization yet, it is the single source for a growing portion of the business. And reconciliation is being eliminated piece by piece for those migrated areas. System integration complexity remains at EO, reflecting the significant ongoing effort of actually migrating systems over to this new model.
Okay, so Scenario 3 is this practical, phased approach. It begins the fundamental shift, transitioning systems one by one, or maybe group by group, to use LedgerRocket as their golden source. This delivers the full benefits of that model, including reconciliation elimination for those migrated systems, while allowing coexistence with legacy systems and managing the complexity of the migration over time.
It's positioned as a necessary and realistic intermediate step for many large, complex organizations on that path towards full transformation. It's how you eat the elephant one bite at a time.
And that brings us neatly to the final destination, the ultimate end state outlined in the sources. Scenario 4. Full golden source implementation. This is where that initial vision we talked about is fully realized.
This is indeed the ultimate goal described in the sources. It represents the most transformative state. And in the Scenario 4 diagram, the fundamental changes spark. It's immediately obvious. All product systems, A through F, are now labeled stateless. And the description is crystal clear. Product systems don't maintain their own ledgers, but write directly to LedgerRocket. Full stop.
Stateless from a financial perspective. Can you explain what that truly means in this context, based on the source? What does stateless mean for a product system?
It means that the product systems themselves no longer hold a definitive record of financial transactions or account balances. They essentially become operational front ends or processing engines that rely entirely on LedgerRocket for the financial outcome, for the financial state. When a product system needs to execute a transaction like making a payment, recording a deposit, whatever it is, it sends a request to LedgerRocket. LedgerRocket validates it, executes it, records it, and the product system simply receives a synchronous confirmation back out. Success or failure from LedgerRocket.
So it asks LedgerRocket, did this happen?
Exactly. And if the product system needs to know an account balance, maybe to display to a user or check eligibility for something, it queries LedgerRocket. LedgerRocket is the state. The product systems don't need to maintain it internally anymore. The key characteristics of Scenario 4 are frankly revolutionary based on how the sources describe them. LedgerRocket becomes the single authoritative transaction store for the entire organization, period. Because every financial transaction across every product flows through LedgerRocket and is recorded and reconciled instantly within the single system, it completely eliminates reconciliation needs across the entire enterprise. Gone.
Wow.
Unified compliance and regulatory enforcement can be applied consistently to every single transaction as it happens. Those pre-approved event templates now define all possible transaction types for all products across the entire organization. And truly definitive, real-time balance availability becomes a reality across all products and accounts, everywhere.
This aligns perfectly with that initial description of LedgerRocket as the single source of truth. So what are the full implementation benefits of actually reaching this stage? What's the payoff?
The implementation benefits in Scenario 4 are really the culmination of the whole journey. You achieve single source of financial truth for the entire organization, meaning there is one definitive, trusted place for all transaction data and balances. No more arguing about whose numbers are right. This enables the complete elimination of reconciliation requirements across the entire enterprise, which is just a massive saving in time, cost, and operational complexity. Huge. You get maximum real-time performance and consistency because all systems are operating off the same, instantly updated ledger state. There's comprehensive compliance enforcement because every single transaction passes through LedgerRocket's universal rule engine before it can be recorded. You have the strongest audit and control capabilities imaginable due to that single, immutable, complete ledger and event store. And it creates a future-proofed financial infrastructure, one that's more agile and easier to integrate with new products or systems in the future, because they just need to interface with LedgerRocket's standard APIs.
And the LedgerRocket features and business outcomes matrix, I'm looking at it now, and it shows almost everything marked with a double check in Scenario 4. It seems like all the capabilities are finally fully realized here.
Precisely. Look at the matrices and the benefit list for Scenario 4. It's just a sea of viewer marks. It signifies full realization. Ultra-high transaction throughput is fully utilized across the entire organizational volume. That source capability citing 200,000 transfers per second. That becomes the actual enterprise capability now. Single unified ledger architecture is achieved one place for all financial truth. Pre-approved event templates govern all transactions universally. Real-time position updates provide truly definitive instant balances for absolutely everything. Embedded compliance controls are enforced universally at source.
It keeps going.
Yeah. AI-enhanced compliance solutions can now leverage the complete high-integrity dataset for maximum effect. Ultra-durable data protection with those zero data loss guarantees now apply to the entire financial record of the organization. Blockchain anchoring provides that external, cryptographic layer of verification for the whole ledger history if needed. Universal store of value support is fully realized for all types of value movements across the entire business, and the resulting business benefits just mirror this complete realization. Complete elimination of reconciliation, a true single source of truth, enhanced regulatory compliance and reporting from a single authoritative source, drastically simplified system architecture by removing all that redundant ledger functionality from numerous product systems, reduced operational complexity across the board, maximum transaction integrity and auditability, and finally, unified financial control through that central rule enforcement and complete real-time visibility.
Okay, one thing on the matrix, though. What about system integration complexity? It also shows that in Scenario 4. That seems a bit counterintuitive if the resulting architecture is supposed to be simplified.
That's a really great point to highlight, and it speaks volumes about the nature of transformation, doesn't it? The U for system integration complexity in Scenario 4 almost certainly refers to the complexity and sheer scale of the journey required to get there. Migrating all existing product systems, some potentially very old, very complex, very difficult to adapt, to become stateless, and integrate directly with LedgerRocket. That is undoubtedly the most demanding and complex implementation project of all the scenarios.
Okay. It's the complexity, the migration, not the end state.
Exactly. While the target architecture in Scenario 4 is indeed simpler and much more efficient from a data management and reconciliation perspective, the path to achieving it requires the most significant architectural changes across the entire organization. Hence, it gets the highest integration complexity rating for the migration effort itself.
That clarifies it perfectly. The destination is simpler, but the journey there is the most complex. Disaster recovery and business continuity are also marked to O in Scenario 4.
Yes, and that makes perfect sense too. With a single, authoritative, ultra-durable ledger covering the entire organization, your disaster recovery and business continuity strategy for your fundamental financial record becomes centralized. It can leverage the robust capabilities of LedgerRocket and its underlying technology, like Tiger Beetle, for maximum resilience and, presumably, minimal recovery time objective. GL code integration also gets O, indicating that in this final state, LedgerRocket is fully integrated with the general ledger mapping process. It's likely automatically assigning the correct GL codes to transactions as they are processed based on the templates, further streamlining accounting and financial reporting workflows.
Wow, okay. So, Scenario 4 really is the ultimate prize described in these sources, complete reconciliation elimination. A true, definitive, single source of financial truth for the entire organization, maximum performance, control, and auditability. But actually achieving it requires the most fundamental shift in architecture and the most complex, demanding migration effort.
Exactly. This is the most transformative scenario. It demands that product systems fundamentally change how they handle financial state, relinquishing their own ledgers. But in return, it delivers the maximum set of benefits outlined in the sources. So if we just take a step back for a moment and look across these four scenarios, starting from that contained, targeted consolidation in Scenario 1, then expanding to enterprise-wide real-time visibility in Scenario 2, beginning the phased migration to Golden Source in Scenario 3, and finally achieving that state of full Golden Source implementation in Scenario 4, you see a really clear, logical evolution in the capabilities being leveraged and the benefits being realized at each step.
Yeah, the progression is very clear.
The matrices and summaries in the source material lay this out beautifully, don't they? Features like becoming the single unified ledger or providing embedded compliance controls right at the point of transaction origination, or achieving a true single source of truth. They start as effectively unavailable marked or quite limited marked in the earlier stages, scenarios 1 and 2. They then start to appear partially marked or maybe fully just for the migrated systems in scenario 3. And they are only fully realized for the entire organization in that final scenario 4.
And the impact on reconciliation is maybe the clearest illustration of this whole progression. It's like the holy grail.
Oh, absolutely. Reconciliation goes from being an ongoing requirement implied in scenario 1 and 2, even if maybe it's eased a bit within a domain or by having better data available, to being partially eliminated in scenario 3, specifically for those systems that have successfully moved to LedgerRocket as their golden source. And then it's completely eliminated across the entire enterprise in scenario 4. For anyone listening who's familiar with the sheer pain and cost of reconciliation in large financial institutions, that is a truly transformative outcome, cannot be overstated.
Yeah, massive.
You also see how core technical capabilities like ultra-high transaction throughput or real-time balance updates might be technically available earlier on, getting that U mark, but they only fully leveraged and deliver their absolute maximum potential, getting the use. When the entire organization's transaction volume and data dependency finally flow through LedgerRocket in scenario 4, it's really about the scale and adoption, not just the presence of the feature itself.
And this whole progression, this journey, it ties directly back to those transformation considerations we discussed right at the beginning.
Yeah.
Complexity, tech debt, risk appetite.
It does, completely.
Yeah.
The scenarios provide a kind of standard framework, a potential path. But the specific path an organization actually takes is dictated by its unique reality. An organization burdened by a significant technical debt might find the jump from scenario 2 all the way to 4 just prohibitively difficult, maybe impossible in one go.
Yep.
They might see scenario 3 as the only realistic path forward, allowing them to start migrating the easier systems first and build from there.
Right.
Another organization, maybe driven by urgent business priorities around real-time liquidity management, might prioritize getting to scenario 2 as quickly as possible, just to get that consolidated view, even if they know they eventually need to move further, maybe towards scenario 4, to fully eliminate reconciliation later. And a more conservative organization, one with a low-risk appetite, might spend significant time validating the value proposition and building internal confidence just in scenario 1, before even considering moving to the more complex, more disruptive later stages.
Makes sense. Different strokes for different folks.
Exactly. So, while scenario 4 clearly represents the peak state of benefits according to these sources, complete reconciliation elimination, true single source, maximum performance, comprehensive control, it's also the most difficult to achieve and requires the most significant changes across the board. Scenarios 1, 2, and 3 aren't just checkpoints on the way. They are pragmatic, value-delivering stages in themselves. They help manage the complexity, the risk, and the investment required to build towards that ultimate transformative state described in Scenario 4.
Okay, so bringing this all back to you, the listener. Why is understanding these distinct scenarios, this whole transformation journey, why is it important for you as you navigate the world of financial systems, maybe technology decisions, or even just trying to stay informed about how modern finance actually operates under the hood?
Well, because it provides a really crucial framework and maybe even a roadmap for understanding what's happening out there. When you hear about a financial institution undertaking a major project related to modernizing their ledger or their transaction processing systems, knowing these scenarios helps you immediately understand what stage they might be at in their journey. Are they implementing something like Ledger Rocket just for a specific product line or maybe one department? That sounds like Scenario 1. Are they focused primarily on gaining enterprise-wide real-time visibility and improving reporting? That's probably Scenario 2. Have they begun the complex, phased process of actually migrating core systems to use a new golden source, becoming stateless? That points to Scenario 3. Or have they somehow achieved that full transformative state of a single golden source for the entire organization? That's Scenario 4.
Right, it gives you context.
Exactly. This understanding allows you to evaluate the scope of what they're doing, anticipate the likely benefits they're aiming for, and maybe even understand the challenges they are probably facing based on which stage they're in. It helps you cut through the marketing hype sometimes and understand the practical realities of modernizing core financial infrastructure. Instead of just hearing, oh, they're implementing a new ledger system, you can understand how they are likely doing it and what that actually means in terms of their operational capabilities, their data integrity, and their overall control environment.
Exactly. It provides a structured way to think about what is, let's face it, a hugely complex technological and organizational transformation. It helps combat that feeling of information overload by giving you these distinct, understandable stages and tying specific, measurable outcomes to each one. You're not just hearing about abstract features, you're seeing a clear path to impact.
And it's worth remembering, these aren't just technical diagrams on a page, right? Each scenario represents a fundamentally different way of organizing financial reality within a company. They impact absolutely everything from how a simple transaction is handled day to day, to how liquidity is managed minute by minute by the Treasury team, how regulatory reports are generated and audited, and ultimately, how the company can strategically leverage its own financial data for better decision-making and future innovation. It changes the game.
This has been a truly in-depth exploration of Ledger Rocket implementation. We started with the core definition from the source material that real-time, authoritative financial transaction engine, the single source of truth, designed to sit synchronously in the transaction flow and, crucially, prevent bad data at the source. We then dive deep into the transformation journey, recognizing that it's almost always a necessary progression, influenced heavily by those factors like organizational complexity, existing technical debt, regulatory needs, business priorities, and of course, risk appetite.
And we walk through the 4 distinct scenarios that define this journey, starting from the focused, lower-risk targeted consolidation of Scenario 1, expanding out to enterprise-wide real-time visibility and reporting in Scenario 2, then undertaking the practical, phased migration with the hybrid golden source model in Scenario 3, all the way to achieving the ultimate state of full golden source implementation in Scenario 4, where reconciliation is finally eliminated and Ledger Rocket becomes the single definitive financial record for the entire organization.
And each step, as we saw, has its own specific characteristics, delivers a unique set of implementation benefits, and unlocks different levels of Ledger Rocket's powerful capabilities, all clearly laid out in the source material we looked at. And the right path, or maybe the right speed, for any given organization, as we discussed, depends entirely on its unique starting point and its strategic context. And so let's leave you with a provocative thought drawn directly from pondering this material. If a single, immutable, real-time ledger can genuinely eliminate that massive operational burden of reconciliation and serve as the indisputable source of financial truth across an entire complex organization, what fundamental new possibilities does that unlock? Not just for efficiency and control today, but for how financial data is leveraged, trusted, and governed in the future. What innovation or what new capabilities become possible when you have that absolute real-time trust in your foundational numbers? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.